Over the last few years, I've been working very slowly to build a small Amtrak train, and for now, it's complete. But I might change everything I'm doing in the future. We'll get back to that later. From the few pieces I have here, you may be able to tell that this Amtrak train is nothing ordinary. What I actually wound up modeling is essentially a generic Amtrak train based out of Chicago. It's got 4 of these ex-Chicago Northwestern gallery cars, and these are a very interesting piece of Amtrak history. I've got 3 of these Phase 4 Horizon cars and a Phase 4 F40. These gallery cars, these Horizons, and this specific F40 were used very commonly around the Chicago area, so it makes for a pretty good train. I've seen plenty of contests where it's just 3 of these Horizons and an F40, and I've seen more where it's just an F40 and 4 of these gallery cars. I've seen some where it's 2 Horizons and 2 gallery cars and an F40, or there's even mix-ups where sometimes you've got a GP40 or sometimes even a P40 with some of this stuff. Now it's time to go through this train piece by piece, and I'm going to start with all 4 of the gallery cars that you can see right here. These are actually the most recent addition to the contest. 2 of these I got earlier. They were used models. One of them has a missing stirrup, which is fine by me, but for the 2 cars, it was a total of $40, and then the other 2, the cab car and the other coach here, I won from an auction on eBay, new in box, and that was still quite a bit of money. I think it was like $120 for the pair, which actually isn't that bad for these HO gallery cars. Before I show you around these cars though, let me explain the whole Chicago Northwestern situation. Amtrak had some interesting commuter trains it needed to run out of the Chicago area, and bought some of these old Chicago Northwestern bi-levels. These were actually not leased from them. I think they were bought directly and repainted into the Amtrak scheme. It's a very weird and unique situation. I don't know what ended up happening to these cars, but they were actually owned completely by Amtrak. With these specific Kato models though, I've actually made some modifications to all of these cars, specifically having to do with the coupler boxes and the grab irons right here. I will start with the coupler boxes. The Kato ones these cars originally came with are terrible. I hate them, so I just kind of got rid of them, and instead I threw on some KD boxes. I'd use some styrene shims under all of them. They don't look the greatest. I might go in and redo this in the future, but it does the job, and the couplers are at almost the perfect height. I would like the couplers to be back a little bit further because the gap between the cars is a little too large. I may be able to help that by adding some actual diaphragms to these cars that move. That might make enough of a difference, but I'm not sure how well that'll actually turn out. And just to demonstrate, I'll show you the gap between these 2 cars. Here's what the gap looks like. It's again not the worst thing I've ever seen, but I'd like it to be better. It bugs me that they are this far apart, and I think potentially diaphragms might be able to fix the issue entirely. The other modification I wound up doing to all 4 cars involves these grab irons right here. When I got the first 2 cars that were used, the grab irons were all torn up and broken. They were very cheap, flimsy plastic pieces, and they did not hold up well whatsoever. The little grab irons up on the top of the car were missing, and I have not installed those because those were an odd shape and size that I don't have a replica of. I did have some of these little brass grab irons right here and threw those in the cars instead, and I think they actually look a lot nicer than the original ones. I may end up painting them silver at some point, but I think the brass looks nice for the time being, and since this train isn't a huge priority of mine right now, I think I can leave them be. There are a couple of things I would like to change involving all of these gallery cars. For one, I want to change the windows. I don't know why this is the case, but they all have this weird green tinge. I'd like to just have some regular clear windows. I just don't like the clear tinge. I have no clue why Kato did this. I don't know if it's accurate. And even if it is accurate, I don't think it looks very good. So I want to throw all that out and put new windows in at some point. The other thing I would like to do going along with that is I'd like to install lighting in these cars. You can see that we actually have some electric pickups right here on both ends, and it's going to be pretty easy to install lighting, at least I would assume. I just need to install a lighting bar up in there, and I would probably want to go in and do that at the same time as I would replace the windows. I don't know if I will get to that anytime soon, but it's for sure something I would like to tackle on all 4 of these cars. Just to show you the interior of the cars, I've taken the shell off. It's actually a very simple process. There aren't any screws or anything holding it in place, just a couple of clips. So all you really need to do is spread out the sides of the car like that, and it'll just pop off really, really simply. The interior also looks really nice. I think there are a few things missing. I don't see any ladders to get from the bottom level to the top level, but that's nothing major. You're not really going to see those when the car is sitting on the track. The seating looks really nice, and most of these cars, if I recall correctly, do not actually have bathrooms inside the cars, so those aren't in here, and I think that's actually accurate to the real things. From what I remember about Kato cars, I think it would be pretty easy to install some wiring for lighting. I think you may just have to drill a couple of holes in the floor of the car to run wires through. I think there's two metal bars that run the entire length of the car on each side. You can solder to those and then run wiring directly up to the roof of the car. It wouldn't be a difficult process. I just need to figure out what light bar and whatnot I would want to use in all these. I do separately want to address the cab car because this car is going to need a lot more work than the other pieces of this set. I do not actually have a decoder in here. I'll open up the car in just a second to show all of you, but what I've done to get the lighting correct, which you'll see when I run this whole train later on in the video, stay tuned for that, is I have actually cut the connection for the red marker lights. Not this here, this is a fake emergency light, but these two lights here, I've cut the wiring to that one light, and I've only got the wiring left for the headlight up top. So really, if I have the car on the track, the only light that'll shine is the top headlight. So I really just run this train in the push configuration, and I am perfectly fine with that. I think it looks really neat. Preferably though, I would like to get a decoder installed in this cab car at some point. Not only for the lighting that I just mentioned, I would like to be able to change the direction of the lighting. It's not even anything to do with the interior lighting that I'm going to hopefully be putting in all these cars. It's got to do with the sound. Since this is a cab car, we've obviously got horns mounted to the roof of the car. It's probably got a bell on the car somewhere that I just haven't noticed. So I would love to have sound and be able to use the horn and the bell on this instead of having to rely on the horn and bell of the locomotive. Here is the car opened up, and you can see that I've done some jank wiring in here. I had originally cut this light, since it had an orange tint, I had assumed it would be the lighting for the marker lights. I was wrong, this is the one that lights up the marker lights. So what I had to do is install this one jumper wire to get the light to work, and it's kind of janky. I really don't like the Kato lighting setup in here. I'm pretty sure these are just bulbs, and ideally I would like to replace these with LEDs when I install a decoder in this thing. Again though, since I always intend to have the F40 pushing the consist and having this cab car leading, it's not a huge deal right now and I can live with it, but it's really not my best work and I would like to make this cab car perfect if at all possible. Next up, it's onto the horizons, and all three of these are made by Walthers. Specifically, these are Walthers mainline pieces. All three of these cars are nearly completely stock out of the box, except for the coupler boxes, which, just like the gallery cars, I had to change because I didn't like them. And just like the gallery cars, I installed some KD boxes directly to the frame of the car. These two screws here held in a very odd cover, and then right here we had a very weird swinging coupler box. I found that on these Walthers cars, it is very, very inconsistent in terms of coupler height. They tend to have quite a few issues, and honestly, I just don't like them. So I deleted those and instead threw on some regular KDs, and that made the coupler height perfect. I've had no issues whatsoever, and in doing so, it actually brought the cars a lot closer together, because stock, these Walthers mainline cars tend to be very far apart. And here's how the gap between these two cars looks. This is the same with the other one as well. Moving those coupler boxes to the frame of the car made a huge difference, and while there is still a little bit of a gap here, I think it looks a lot better, and this is the result I would like to have out of those Kato gallery cars. The only thing worth noting about this coupler box modification is that these cars can no longer run on 18-inch radius curves. I think the coupler sticking out further from the car, along with the swinging coupler box, were designed so that these could operate on 18-inch radius curves, and honestly, they don't look good on that. The layout that I typically operate on has, at its smallest, a 22-inch radius curve, and it's got much, much broader curves everywhere else, so it's really not a concern of mine, and these cars seem to perform flawlessly on that layout. There are two things worth noting that I really don't like about these cars. Both of them actually involve the trucks. The first of which is the coloration of these trucks. I don't know how Walthers did this, but these trucks are incredibly off in terms of color. They should not be this gray color. I can't remember exactly whether they should be silver or black, but this color is very, very wrong, and it looks way off when you're looking at the train, so that for sure needs to change. The other thing, if you flip this car over, we have some of the same contact patches as we had on the Kato cars, but there's nothing on the truck to pick up power. I wanted to install lighting in this car. I'll show you the interior in a couple of seconds, by the way. But I went in and looked at it, and it's pretty costly to upgrade and get new trucks for the lighting kit because you can't use these trucks if you're trying to light the car. I think it's something like $20 a car, and given what I'm going to talk about later on in the video, I really did not want to make that expense for 3 of these cars. I've taken the shell off of this car, and it is a little bit of a different process than the gallery cars. We have 4 holes underneath the car right here, which screws are supposed to go into, and that's what holds the shell into position. This actually seems to work quite well. It's really easy to get these screws out. You don't have to remove the trucks or anything, and I think it does just a fine job of holding the shell onto the chassis. In here, I think the interior might be a slightly lower quality than the Kato cars, which is to be expected since these were much cheaper. The plastic is a little bit less detailed, but it still doesn't look that bad in here. This is a regular coach. I believe these two here would be restrooms. There's nothing in the restroom of the car, but since there's no window on the outside looking into the restroom, there's really no point in having detail in here on a car of this price point, so I can't knock them for that. It looks just fine in here. I don't really like how we have these 4 screws that are exposed in a very contrasting color, black screws on the beige interior. I would rather them be silver or something that matches a little bit more, but it's kind of hard to spot when the shell is on. Before we move away from the Horizons and onto the F40, I did want to mention that I have 3 of these. 2 of them are coaches, and 1 of them is a dinette. And now it's onto the Phase 4 F40, which also happens to be a Walthers mainline model. And for the most part, this has been an extremely dependable locomotive. I've only encountered 2 small issues, we'll get to those in a little bit, but this engine has been more than adequate for the job. It looks decent, it's got more than enough power to pull the whole train, and it's dead reliable. The only 2 issues I've encountered with this locomotive involve the plow and the couplers. With the couplers, it's a pretty simple story. Both ends of the locomotive were extremely low, so what I had to do was I had to use one of these Cadies. I can't remember what the exact correct name of it is. The shank is down here and the coupler head is up here. I need to order more of these because I'm running really low on them, but they are extremely useful, and I've got a much shorter one at the front of the unit, and these have done the job and have corrected the wrong coupler height. The other issue I had was the plow. When I first got the unit, for whatever reason, the plow was way too low. I took it out onto the main line and it immediately got caught on a switch, and then it got caught in the gap between 2 pieces of track, so I had to take the locomotive off, go take it over to a workbench, and file down the bottom of this plow, and ever since then, I haven't had a single issue with it. I don't understand how this plow was so dramatically low, but a little bit of filing work seemed to have fixed it. You can see right here where I had to file down the plow, and again, that fixed the entire issue. There's a little bit of a low spot here that I didn't get to, but since I'm not having that issue anymore, I'm not too concerned about it. Plus, since I'm now running this locomotive almost exclusively in the configuration where it's pushing the train, it's not any concern whatsoever. If the lowest part of the plow is at the front here, it's never going to be going directly into any rail gaps or anything like that. It's going to be being pushed over them. So I really should not encounter any issues with this plow anymore. I do have to say though, in terms of detail, there are a lot of shortcomings when it comes to this locomotive. Overall, it's really kind of basic. The trucks look extremely simple. There's really nothing on the fuel tank. The side of the locomotive also is extremely simple. There's very little detail on the back. The class lights here aren't even painted. The pilot down here looks extremely simple, and it's the same case on the other side of the model. And up front we have no paint on any of these details at all, and I feel like the horn would have some sort of paint on it, and I don't think it would be completely closed at the front like this. Again, I know this is a cheaper model, but these are definitely some shortcomings. Before we get into the really big shortcomings, something else I don't like is how there's really no cab interior. You can just see all the wiring directly through the windows of the cab. It's not even like they tried to hide it. It's just out in the open, and you can very, very clearly see all the wiring that goes to the lights and whatnot. The major issue I just referred to is the length of the locomotive. In real life, the F40s are 56 feet and 2 inches long. I have a little scale ruler right here, and I can measure just how long this locomotive is from the tip right about here. I would like it not to fall over, to the back. And it appears to be about 53.5 or 54 feet long. So this is 2 to 2.5 scale feet too short. And just for comparison's sake, I have a very cursed lifelike Union Pacific F40 right here. This is actually more correct in terms of length than this one is right here. It's a very, very weird situation, but if I hold both of these lined up just about perfectly, you can see the lines on the back of the unit are a little bit off. The one on the Union Pacific model is a little further back than the one on the Walthers model, and this deck here sticks out just a little bit more. So while this unit here is still a little too short, it's actually more accurate in terms of length than the newer Walthers mainline unit. And just for comparison's sake, I know it's kind of hard to see on camera, but this unit measures in at about 55.5 scale feet long. A little bit earlier, I said that this whole consist that I just showed you is what I'm going to be modeling for now. Originally, I didn't want to do something based out of Chicago. I had a completely different idea and I just executed it quite poorly. What I had originally wanted to do is I wanted to have an early Amtrak Capital, which is a train that ran from San Jose to Sacramento. And early on in its lifespan, they actually used Phase 3 F40s and Phase 3 Horizons. For some reason, years ago, I thought that a Phase 4 F40 would be cooler, even though they never used them in that period of time. So I have this and 3 Horizons, even though they aren't accurate to the consist that I wanted to model. And after finding that out, I figured out that these matched more perfectly to an Amtrak Hiawatha set. I had also heard about Amtrak having those bi-levels, and when I found some for cheap, I decided to pounce on those and buy them probably a year or so after learning about my mistake. So for now, I have a fairly decent Amtrak Chicago-based commuter set, but I might be changing everything at some point in the future. I am considering at some point in the future getting a Rapido Phase 3 F40 and some Rapido Horizons. However, I don't know if I'll do so, and if I do, it'll probably be a few years down the line. For now, this train is pretty decent. It looks good, I enjoy running it, and I've got no problems with it whatsoever. Plus, I've got plenty of other projects I would like to get done. I've got my Union Pacific Officer Car Special, my Baltimore and Ohio Coal Train, I've got my Western Pacific Freight Train, the consist I'm trying to build with my Union Pacific GP9s, and a specific BNSF tanker train I'm working on building. All those I think I want to get done before I revisit my whole Amtrak consist. On the other hand though, I did mention all the shortcomings of this train. I didn't really like the sound of this unit. I don't think I mentioned that specifically. We have the inaccuracies around this unit. We've got all the problems with the Walthers cars and their whole lighting situation in trucks. And we have them being in the wrong phase. Even for being with the bi-levels, Phase 4 would be a little bit of a stretch. But I'd like your feedback. Since I've got so many other projects, should I just kind of forget about this whole dilemma and run this train until I get a bunch of other stuff done? Or should I make it my mission to make this train as good as it can possibly be? Additionally, if I do wind up buying the Rapido pieces I talked about earlier, they'd still work perfectly with those Amtrak gallery cars. They are much more accurate and would actually be running with those gallery cars, a Phase 3 F40 and some Phase 3 Horizons, than a whole bunch of Phase 4 stuff. So I could still keep those around, and they're a very interesting and unique piece that I think I want to keep just for that sole purpose. Now that I've gone over my entire Amtrak consist and what I might potentially do to it in the future, it's time to go run this train. So that was an overview of my complete Amtrak set based out of the Chicago area. Again, if anyone does have any suggestions as to what I should do, whether I should just keep running this train as it is and forget about its imperfections, or strive to make it as perfect as possible and get some new rapido pieces, please do let me know. I'd love to hear your feedback.